The sharp crack of Major Tyler Brennan's knuckles on the mahogany briefing table echoed through the Tactical Operations Center like a gunshot. 43 personnel seated in tiered rows turned their attention forward as the morning briefing commenced at Forward Operating Base Stallworth. The air conditioning hummed against the Afghan heat bleeding through reinforced walls. Digital maps glowed on 6 mounted screens displaying terrain features and enemy movement patterns across the province. Rebecca Holland entered through the rear door at exactly 0617 hours. She wore civilian business casual, khaki pants, and a loose blue button-down that hung on her 5'5" frame. Dark brown hair pulled into a regulation-tight bun despite no longer being required to maintain standards. She carried a tablet and a worn leather portfolio that had seen better days. The 138 pounds she carried moved with practiced economy as she navigated to the civilian section against the back wall, a row of folding chairs separate from the military seating. Major Brennan stood at the podium, 6'1" with the lean build of a competitive runner. Sandy blonde hair in a high and tight, cold blue eyes scanning his notes. West Point ring caught the fluorescent light as he gestured toward the primary display. Combat readiness stands at 87%. Enemy activity has decreased in sectors 3 and 5 based on our recent operations. His voice carried the confidence of someone who'd spent more time in briefing rooms than on patrol. Intelligence suggests the primary insurgent network has moved southwest, away from our area of operations. Rebecca's eyes tracked to the digital map. Her jaw tightened. She made a notation on her tablet with fingers that bore calluses inconsistent with desk work. Small scars crossed the back of her right hand, the kind that came from broken glass or shrapnel. She raised her hand, a small gesture, waiting. Brennan continued for another 30 seconds before noticing. Yes? Question from the back? Rebecca Holland, GS-12 intelligence analyst, sir. Her voice was measured, calm. Hazel eyes that carried something heavier than fatigue met his across the room. The assessment has a discrepancy. The movement pattern in Sector 5 isn't retreat, it's repositioning. The timeline suggests... I'm sorry, Brennan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Who are you again? Becky from the copy room? Laughter rippled through the junior officer section. First Lieutenant Jake Mercer, 26, with product-styled black hair, turned to the officer beside him. Captain Vanessa Pruitt, blonde and sharp-featured, covered her mouth but her shoulders shook with suppressed amusement. It's Rebecca Holland, and the enemy pattern indicates flanking preparation, not withdrawal. If you compare the... This is a combat briefing, sweetheart. Brennan's tone shifted to condescending patience. The admin pool is down the hall. I'm sure there's filing that needs attention. More laughter. 15 phones lifted throughout the room. Rebecca's hand lowered. She made another notation, stylus moving with mechanical precision. Her back remained against the wall, eyes tracking exits and entrances in a pattern too practiced to be conscious thought. In the far corner, Colonel Raymond Fisher leaned forward. 52 years old, gray hair and steel gray eyes that had seen 3 decades of service, multiple combat tours with special forces before age and politics pushed him to command positions. He watched how Rebecca sat, back to wall, eyes on doors, weight balanced on the balls of her feet despite being seated, the posture of someone trained to react, not someone who shuffled papers. Sergeant First Class Monica Reed stood near the equipment lockers, 35, powerful build, dark brown eyes that missed nothing. She'd served 15 years across multiple theaters, psychological operations assignments that put her in joint task force environments. She observed Rebecca's hand position on the stylus, not a writing grip, a defensive tool grip, thumb along the barrel, index finger near the tip, the way you held something when you might need it as a weapon. Desk Jockey wants to Monday morning quarterback actual operators. Brennan returned to his notes, dismissing her with body language. Classic. Captain Pruitt's voice carried from the third row. Maybe stick to PowerPoint, hun. Leave tactical assessment to people who've actually been outside the wire. Mercer added his contribution, loud enough for the recording phones. Bet she thinks Call of Duty counts as deployment experience. The laughter increased. 43 people, and only 2 weren't participating. Colonel Fisher's expression had gone flat. SFC Reed pulled her phone, typing rapidly. Rebecca said nothing. She maintained eye contact with Major Brennan for 3.2 seconds, long enough to communicate something, not long enough to be insubordination. Then her eyes returned to her tablet, face neutral as carved stone. Brennan surveyed the room. Anyone else want to waste our time with uninformed opinions? No? Outstanding. Let's continue. He proceeded through the remainder of the briefing: equipment status, personnel rotations, supply chain updates. Rebecca made notes throughout, her stylus never pausing. When Brennan discussed the Sector 5 assessment again, emphasizing the enemy withdrawal theory, her jaw muscle flexed once. That was all. The briefing concluded at 06:47 hours. Dismissed. Chairs scraped, conversations erupted. Personnel filed toward exits in clusters, discussing assignments and grabbing coffee before duty stations opened. Rebecca stood, gathering her materials with methodical precision. She organized the tablet and portfolio, movements economical and purposeful. As she reached for her coffee thermos, her sleeve rode up slightly on her right arm. Black ink became visible for half a second, the curved edge of text that might have been numbers. She noticed, adjusted the sleeve immediately, pulling the cuff down to her wrist. But Sergeant First Class Reed had seen it. From 15 feet away, in less than 1 second of exposure, she'd recognized he pattern. Not a civilian tattoo, military ink, specific style. She knew because she had similar markings hidden under her own uniform sleeves. Colonel Fisher intercepted Rebecca near the exit. "Miss Holland." She stopped, turned. "Sir, that assessment you mentioned, send it to my office. I'd like to review the data." "Yes, sir." No emotion, no vindication, just compliance. "And Rebecca," Fisher's voice dropped, "don't let the noise get to you. Good analysis speaks for itself." She nodded once and left. Fisher watched her go, then turned to find SFC Reed approaching. "Sir, we might have a situation." "Explain." Reed glanced around, ensuring privacy. "That analyst, Captain Holland, I think I know her." Fisher's eyebrows rose. "Captain? I could be wrong, sir, but if I'm right, Major Brennan just made a catastrophic mistake." The forward operating base Stallworth dining facility smelled of powdered eggs and industrial coffee at 0730 hours. Morning shift personnel filled half the tables, the rumble of conversation mixing with the clatter of metal trays on metal tables. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that peculiar military green tint that made food look even less appealing than it tasted. Major Tyler Brennan sat at the officers' table near the windows, First Lieutenant Jake Mercer to his right, Captain Vanessa Pruitt across from him. 3 coffee cups and plates of barely touched scrambled eggs formed the landscape of their morning ritual. Pruitt's voice carried just loud enough. "Can you believe that civilian tried to correct you in front of everyone?" Brennan cut into his eggs without looking up. Some people read a few articles online and suddenly think they're tactical experts. Mercer grinned. Probably gets her military knowledge from Netflix documentaries. Maybe wrote a paper about Afghanistan in college and now she's an expert. The rear entrance opened. Rebecca Holland entered alone, moving through the serving line with economical movements. Black coffee, bowl of oatmeal, nothing else. She paid the cashier with exact change, turned toward the seating area. Pruitt tracked her movement. Someone should remind her what her actual job description is. Analysis means looking at data, not questioning operational commanders. She probably thinks she's helping. Mercer's tone dripped false sympathy. Doesn't understand the difference between reading reports and actual ground truth. Rebecca selected a small table in the corner, back to the wall, facing the entrance. She set down her tray, pulled out her tablet, began reading while eating. Methodical bites between paragraphs. The morning routine of someone who'd learned to fuel efficiently rather than enjoy meals. The main entrance burst open. Private Collins, 19 years old and perpetually nervous, backed through the door carrying 2 full coffee urns for the serving line. He turned, didn't see the wet floor sign, foot slipped. The urn tilted. 2 gallons of scalding coffee began its gravity-driven descent toward the tile floor and 3 occupied tables in the splash zone. Rebecca moved. Her left hand shot out, catching the falling urn by its handle before it completed its first rotation. Simultaneously, her right hand swept across the table, moving 3 trays 18 inches to the left, out of the projected splash radius. The coffee that did escape the urn hit tile in a contained space, missing all personnel and equipment. The entire sequence took 1.3 seconds. The dining facility went silent. 60 eyes locked on the corner table where a 5'5" analyst had just displayed reaction time and spatial awareness that belonged in a different category of human. Private Collins stood frozen. "Holy shit, ma'am, how did you?" "Careful." Rebecca released the urn into his now steady grip. Single word, calm voice. She returned to her oatmeal as if nothing had occurred. The silence lasted another 2 seconds, but conversation resumed, but the quality had changed. People weren't talking about duty assignments anymore. They were talking about what they just witnessed. Lieutenant Mercer forced a laugh. "Lucky reflexes." Pruitt nodded, but her eyes remained on Rebecca. "My yoga instructor has good reflexes too. It's just body awareness training." Colonel Fisher stood near the coffee station, mug halfway to his lips, expression unreadable. He'd been a Green Beret for 12 years before politics pushed him up. He knew the difference between athletic reflexes and combat-trained reactions. That hadn't been luck. That had been pattern recognition and muscle memory operating faster than conscious thought. Rebecca finished her oatmeal in 4 minutes, drained her coffee, cleared her tray. She walked past the officer's table without acknowledgement, exited through the main door. Brennan watched her leave. Something flickered across his face, too quick to categorize. Weird. 1100 hours found the base gym half filled with off-duty personnel. The weights section clanged with dropped barbells. 2 basketball games competed on opposite courts. The cardio area held a dozen runners on treadmills, each locked in their private endurance contest. Rebecca ran on treadmill 7, wearing Army PT uniform despite being civilian. Black shorts, gray short with reflective Army logo, running shoes that had seen serious mileage. Her pace was steady, 7-minute miles, breathing controlled. Scars visible on her left forearm, 3 parallel lines that looked like shrapnel tracks. Burn scar on her right hand, the kind that came from grabbing something hot in an emergency. The main entrance opened. Major Brennan's group entered for mandatory physical training. Mercer carried a water bottle, dropped it near treadmill 7 as he passed. The bottle hit the floor, rolled. He stepped on it deliberately, plastic crunching. Water sprayed across Rebecca's running space. Oops, Mercer didn't stop walking. Slippery. Rebecca adjusted her pace, moved to treadmill 9 without breaking stride. She didn't look at Mercer, didn't acknowledge the deliberate disrespect, just adapted and continued. Captain Pruitt smiled. "Clumsy of you, Jake." "Yeah, real umsy." 1400 hours. Arms room adjacent to the gym, separated by a concrete wall and a connecting corridor. Rebecca needed to sign out a laptop from the IT office located in the same building. Administrative errand, routine and forgettable. She walked past the arms room inspection area. The door stood open. Major Brennan's group surrounded a table covered in unfamiliar weapons, a new shipment requiring inventory and familiarization. Lieutenant Mercer struggled with a bullpup-configured rifle, turning it over in his hands. This Austrian piece of garbage. How does the charging handle even work? Nothing's where it should be. Rebecca continued walking, eyes forward, but her voice carried as she passed the open door. Steyr AUG A3. Charging handle is forward of the trigger guard, non-reciprocating. Release is behind the magazine well. Optic rail is integrated into the carry handle. She kept moving, disappearing down the corridor toward IT. The arms room went silent. Captain Pruitt stared at the doorway. How the hell does a GS-12 analyst know that? Mercer picked up the rifle again, found the charging handle exactly where she'd indicated. Maybe she Googled it? When? Brennan's voice was flat. She walked past for 3 seconds. Sergeant First Class Reed stood near the weapons table, ostensibly present for the inventory inspection as senior NCO. She'd watched the entire interaction, her expression carefully neutral. That's not Google knowledge, sir. That's hands-on familiarity. Most infantry don't know foreign weapons that specifically. Brennan set down the weapon he'd been examining. So she's a gun enthusiast. Plenty of civilians are into that. Sure, Reed's tone suggested she didn't believe her own agreement. Colonel Fisher entered the arms room, clipboard in hand for the mandatory inspection signature. He'd heard the exchange from the corridor. Major Brennan, a word. They stepped into the hallway. Fisher kept his voice low. Maybe ease up on the civilian analyst. Sir, with respect, she's overstepping, creating confusion in the chain of command. Civilians need to stay in their lane. I'm saying this for your benefit, Tyler. Fisher's steel gray eyes held steady. You're making assumptions. Sometimes assumptions get people hurt. She's an intelligence analyst. She reads reports. That doesn't make her tactical. Fisher signed the inspection form. Just remember, I warned you. He left Brennan standing in the corridor, expression caught between irritation and something that might have been the first seed of doubt. Back in the arms room, Sergeant First Class Reed pulled her phone, typed a message to a contact listed only as J. Davis, JSOC. 3 words. Found her. Confirm identity. The response came in 40 seconds. Confirmed. Do not compromise her cover. Will advise. Reed deleted both messages and pocketed her phone. The recreation yard at Forward Operating Base Stallworth filled with off-duty personnel as word spread about the impromptu stress shoot competition. 1,800 hours meant the worst of the Afghan heat had passed, leaving behind that golden hour light that made everything look like a movie set. The firing range occupied the eastern section of the compound, 25 meters of cleared space with pop-up targets and safety berms. Major Tyler Brennan stood near the ammunition table, loading magazines with practiced efficiency. Open competition, all personnel welcome. Let's see who can actually shoot versus who just talks about shooting. 63 people gathered, a mix of infantry, support staff, and administrative personnel, looking for entertainment before evening chow. Phones appeared in hands, recording angles established. Someone had already started a betting pool on a tablet, names and odds updating in real time. Rebecca Holland walked past the crowd, heading toward the intelligence office for evening shift. She wore the same civilian clothes from morning briefing, portfolio under one arm, earbuds in. Country music leaked from the speakers, barely audible. Brennan spotted her. Hey, Holland, desk jockeys allowed too. We need someone to finish last, make the rest of us look good. The crowd turned. Laughter rippled through the formation. Rebecca stopped, removed one earbud. I need to get to work, sir. It's an open competition, unless you're scared. Brennan's smile was all teeth, no warmth. 5 minutes. Show us what that tactical knowledge looks like in practice. Lieutenant Mercer held up a Beretta M9. We'll even let you use the easy mode, pistol qualification, basic stuff. Captain Pruitt added her voice. Come on, unless all that weapon expertise is just theory. Rebecca stood motionless for 3 seconds. 63 people watching, 24 phones recording, the weight of expectations and mockery pressing down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Fine. She set her portfolio on a bench, walked to the firing line. The betting tablet updated. Rebecca Holland, 50-1 odds against placing in top 10. Specialist Danny Ortiz, 22 years old with an honest face and growing discomfort, leaned toward his buddy. This feels wrong, man. His friend whispered back, but neither of them was smiling. Brennan handed Rebecca the Beretta. Standard qualification, 10 rounds, 2 magazines, 25 meters. Hit the targets in whatever order you want. Clock starts when you're ready. Rebecca accepted the weapon. Her hands moved through an immediate safety check, muscle memory so ingrained it looked like breathing. Magazine out, chamber inspection, press check. She ejected the magazine again, visually inspected the rounds. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just a fractional tightening around the eyes. The extractor was damaged, subtle but enough to cause failure to feed malfunctions. Someone had tampered with this weapon. The other shooters had received clean firearms. She said nothing, walked to the maintenance table, retrieved a cleaning kit without asking permission. Field stripped the Beretta on the shooting bench while 63 people watched in confused silence. 8.3 seconds to disassemble. Her hands... She removed the damaged extractor, walked to the spare parts bin, selected the correct replacement from 20 options without hesitation. 7.1 seconds to rebuild. The Beretta came together like puzzle pieces that had always belonged that way. She performed a function check, nodded once, returned to the line. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Captain Pruitt's voice carried genuine confusion now, not mockery. Rebecca didn't answer. She loaded the first magazine, assumed a firing stance. Colonel Fisher had materialized at the back of the crowd. 52 years old, arms crossed, watching with the intensity of someone who'd just recognized a familiar pattern. "That's armorer-level speed," he said to no one in particular. Rebecca's stance was modified weaver, feet shoulder-width apart, slight forward lean, support hand wrapped around firing hand with thumbs aligned. Textbook form from someone who'd been taught by people who'd spent decades perfecting the technique. The range officer raised his hand. "On your mark." Rebecca's breathing slowed. 2 breaths. In, out. Her eyes tracked the targets, mapping distances and angles in the half-second before movement. Go. The first 5 rounds fired in 3.2 seconds. Each report sharp and controlled. 5 silhouette targets, 5 center mass impacts, no wasted movement. The Beretta tracked from target to target with machine efficiency. Magazine change. Her support hand moved to her belt line in a reload motion so automatic it had to be trained. She caught herself halfway through the motion, adjusted, performed a more conventional magazine swap. Still fast, still controlled, but missing that combat reload fluidity for just a moment. Malfunction on round 7. Failure to feed. Rebecca's response was instantaneous. Tap the magazine, rack the slide, acquire target, fire. The malfunction clearance took 0.4 seconds and didn't break her rhythm. Final 3 rounds in 2.9 seconds. 3 headshots at 25 meters with iron sights. The kind of precision that required thousands of practice repetitions to make automatic. Total time, 6.7 seconds. The range fell silent, except for the ringing echo of gunfire fading across the compound. The range officer checked his stopwatch twice. 6.7 seconds. He looked up, confusion clear on his face. Army pistol qualification standard is 15 seconds. That's not Army speed, that's Tier 1 operator speed. Sergeant First Class Reed stood near the ammunition table. She'd pulled her phone, making another note. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes told a different story. Recognition, confirmation, memory. "That's Special Operations speed," she said quietly to Colonel Fisher. Major Brennan's jaw worked. Lucky run. Anyone can get lucky once. Probably shoots competitively on weekends. IDPA or something. "Let's see her do it again," Lieutenant Mercer added, but his voice lacked the earlier confidence. Rebecca set the Beretta down, turned to leave. "I have work." "What's wrong?" Brennan stepped into her path. "Hit your skill ceiling already?" The crowd pressed closer. Phones zoomed in. The betting tablet had frozen, no one updating odds anymore. Specialist Ortiz found his voice. "Ma'am, you don't have to prove anything." Rebecca looked at the young specialist. Something in her expression softened for a fraction of a second. Then she turned back to Brennan. "What do you want, Major?" "Rifle range, 300 meters. Iron sights, no optics. 5 targets, 30 seconds." He smiled. "Standard infantry work. Should be easy for someone with your skills." The crowd murmured. 300 meters with iron sights was difficult. Doing it in 30 seconds was nearly impossible for anyone outside specialized units. Rebecca's hand went to her sleeve, adjusting the cuff in a nervous gesture. The fabric pulled slightly, revealing half an inch of black ink before she covered it again. "Fine." The crowd moved to the rifle range like a migration.
63 people becoming an audience for something they didn't fully understand yet but could feel building. The air had that electric quality of moments before definition, when the ordinary was about to become extraordinary. Major Brennan handed Rebecca an M4 carbine with iron sights. No optics, no assistance, just metal and mathematics and the human ability to calculate trajectory under pressure. She checked the weapon. This one was clean, no sabotage, just a rifle and 5 targets 3 football fields away. Rebecca assumed prone position, support elbow planted, rifle stock in the pocket of her shoulder, breathing control visible in the rise and fall of her back. The kind of breathing discipline that came from long-range precision training. The range officer raised his hand. 30 seconds, 5 targets, on your mark. Rebecca's world narrowed. The crowd disappeared. The phones disappeared. Everything except the targets and the mathematics of bullet drop and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Go. 5 shots, 14.2 seconds, 5 impacts, all center mass at 300 meters with iron sights. The range officer lowered his binoculars. Perfect score, 14.2 seconds. He paused. That's Special Forces qualification time. No one was laughing now. Major Tyler Brennan stared at the target results for 7 seconds before speaking. The sun had dropped lower, casting long shadows across the rifle range. 63 personnel stood in absolute silence, phones still recording, capturing something that had shifted from entertainment to something else entirely. Okay, Brennan's voice had lost its casual confidence. Let's try something different. Field strip and reassemble, blindfolded. Rebecca stood from prone position, dust on her khaki pants from the firing line. Sir, this isn't part of standard qualification. Scared? The challenge was weaker now, missing its earlier edge. Lieutenant Mercer retrieved a blindfold from the medical kit, typically used for concussion assessments. Captain Pruitt watched from
15 feet away, arms crossed, her expression cycling through confusion and something that might have been concern. Rebecca accepted the blindfold without further protest. The fabric covered her eyes completely. Someone from the crowd verified no gaps existed. Brennan placed an M4 carbine in her hands. Disassemble and reassemble. We'll time it. Rebecca's fingers moved across the weapon, mapping its geography through touch. Her hands found the magazine release, the charge-in handle, the takedown pins. 23 seconds to complete disassembly. Each part placed in organized sequence on the shooting bench, spatial memory creating a mental map of component locations. But it wasn't the speed that made Sergeant First Class Reed pull out her phone again. It was the methodology, the specific sequence. Upper receiver before lower receiver, bolt carrier group with charging handle still attached, removed as a single unit. Hammer spring extracted with a technique that minimized reassembly difficulty. That's Ranger School methodology, Reed said quietly to Colonel Fisher. They teach that specific sequence because it's fastest for combat reassembly. Fisher nodded slowly. I noticed. 19 seconds for reassembly. Rebecca's hands never fumbled, never searched. Muscle memory operated independent of visual input. When she removed the blindfold, the M4 was complete and functional. She performed a press check without being asked, verifying chamber status automatically. The range officer looked at his stopwatch. 42 seconds total. That's instructor-level proficiency. Major Brennan's face had gone tight. Where did you learn that? Rebecca handed back the weapon. I need to get to work, sir. Answer the question. I've been around weapons. Her voice remained level, but something underneath it suggested boundaries approaching. Captain Pruitt stepped forward. Been around them how? That's not civilian shooting club knowledge. A sergeant from the crowd, someone who'd done 2 deployments with the 82nd Airborne, spoke up. Only people who field strip blind are special operations and instructors. That's not something you learn casually. Rebecca said nothing. She turned toward the exit. We're not done. Brennan moved to intercept. Shoot house, close quarters. Let's see if you can actually move under pressure. The shoot house occupied the northern section of the training compound, 12 rooms configured to simulate urban combat environments, plywood walls painted to look like concrete, doorways with actual doors, furniture and obstacles creating realistic navigation challenges, pop-up targets throughout, some hostile, some civilian, the difference between good shooting and catastrophic mistakes. Standard qualification time was 90 seconds. Acceptable time for experienced infantry was 60 seconds. Anything under 50 seconds belonged to people with specialized training. 70 personnel now. Word had spread. Off-duty soldiers materialized from barracks and offices, drawn by rumors of something extraordinary happening at the ranges. The betting tablet had disappeared. No one was gambling anymore. They were witnessing. Rebecca stood at the shoot house entrance, accepting the M4 with attached blank adapter. Her hands performed the safety check automatically. Magazine seated, chamber check, selector switch verification. Colonel Fisher watched from the observer platform. Beside him, Sergeant First Class Reed held her phone, not recording, but texting. The message was simple: "You need to see this, now." The response came in seconds. Inbound, 20 minutes. The range officer explained the course. 12 rooms, 16 hostile targets, 8 civilian no-shoots. You'll be timed from entry to final room clear. Any questions? Rebecca shook her head. She approached the door, weapon at low ready. Her breathing slowed. Shoulders dropped half an inch. The transition was subtle but complete. Something shifted in her posture, in the way she held the rifle, in the focus of her eyes. Execute when ready. Rebecca entered. The first room cleared in 4 seconds. 2 targets engaged, perfect double-tap center mass on each. Movement to the next room was textbook. She sliced the corner, weapon leading, eyes tracking for threats before her body entered the fatal funnel of the doorway. Room 2, 3 targets, 1 civilian, 5 seconds, 0 mistakes. The crowd on the observation platform watched in silence. This wasn't lucky shooting anymore. This was systematic, trained, refined through repetition, until it became automatic. Room 4 held a malfunction scenario. Target behind furniture requiring position change. Rebecca dropped to prone, engaged from under a table, rolled left, came up in kneeling position for the exit. 7 seconds. Lieutenant Mercer whispered to no one in particular. That's CQB flow. That's deliberate room clearing. Room 7, hallway with multiple corners and a stairwell. Rebecca cleared it with precision that belonged in training videos. Each corner approached from the proper angle. Each potential threat line addressed before advancing. Weapon transitions between targets were economical, no wasted motion. Specialist Danny Ortiz stood at the back of the observation crowd, 22 years old and watching something that made his tactical training feel like kindergarten. Who is she? No one answered because no one knew, or the ones who suspected weren't ready to speak it aloud yet. Final room, 4 targets in complex positions. 2 required kneeling shots. 1 required shooting around a barrier. The last was a distance shot across the room's length. Rebecca cleared it in 6 seconds. 4 shots, 4 hits. She emerged from the shoot house, weapon pointed in safe direction, finger off the trigger. The blank adapter still smoking slightly from the rapid firing sequence. Time. The range officer's voice cracked slightly. 47 seconds. Perfect discrimination. 0 civilian casualties. That's the second fastest time recorded on this course. Colonel Fisher leaned forward. What's the fastest? 43 seconds, sir. Set by a DevGru operator during a training visit 2 years ago. Stretched. 70 people trying to reconcile what they'd seen with what they thought they knew about the woman standing in front of them. Captain Pruitt found her voice. Where did you train? What unit? Rebecca set the weapon on the clearing barrel, performed a chamber check out of habit. I'm a GS-12 intelligence analyst. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. Major Brennan stepped off the observation platform, walking toward Rebecca with purpose. You're hiding something. That level of proficiency doesn't come from weekend shooting courses. I qualified on standard military weapons during my time in service. You were enlisted? Mercer asked. I served. Now I analyze intelligence. That's what I'm going to do if we're finished here. Rebecca turned toward the exit. As she moved, her sleeve caught on the shoot house doorframe. The fabric tore at the shoulder seam. 6 inches of black ink became visible on her right arm before she could cover it. But 20 phones had zoomed in. 20 cameras captured it. The image that would change everything. 75th, someone from the crowd read the partial tattoo. That's Ranger Regiment scroll. Rebecca's hand went to the torn fabric, holding it closed. Her face remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed the calculation happening behind them. Fight or flight responses activating after years of dormancy. Major Brennan closed the distance. What is that tattoo? It's personal. Bullshit. You're wearing a Ranger tab. That's stolen valor. That's a federal crime. I need to leave. Rebecca's voice stayed level, but the edge underneath it had sharpened. You're not going anywhere until you explain yourself. Colonel Fisher's voice cut through the tension. Major Brennan, stand down. Sir, she's impersonating. I said stand down, now. Fisher dissented from the observation platform, his steel-gray eyes locked on Rebecca. Miss Holland, I think we need to have a conversation in my office. The black SUV arrived at Forward Operating Base Stallworth's main gate at 1847 hours, exactly 19 minutes after Sergeant First Class Reed sent her message. The vehicle passed through security with priority clearance, the kind that made gate guards snap to attention without asking questions. Lieutenant General Patricia Wardell emerged from the passenger seat. 54 years old, 5'6", with a commanding presence that made her seem taller. Salt and pepper hair in a short, professional cut. Dark brown eyes that had seen 3 decades of military service and missed nothing. 2 stars gleamed on her uniform collar, but the combat infantryman badge and ranger tab above her left pocket told a more important story. She'd been conducting theater-wide inspections, evaluating forward operating bases for readiness assessments. FOB Stallworth wasn't scheduled for another 2 days. Her early arrival meant something had changed priorities. Colonel Raymond Fisher met her at the Operations Center entrance. General Wardell, we weren't expecting you until Thursday. Plans changed, Colonel. I received an urgent communication that required immediate attention. She glanced toward the training compound, where 70 personnel still lingered near the shoot house. Why are that many soldiers not at duty stations at this hour? Fisher's jaw tightened. Ma'am, there's been a situation. It requires your attention. Show me. They walked toward the crowd. Personnel noticed the 2-star general approaching and scattered like birds from gunfire. Within 30 seconds, the 70 had diminished to 15. The ones who remained were directly involved. Major Brennan, Captain Pruitt, Lieutenant Mercer, Sergeant First Class Reed, Specialist Ortiz, and Rebecca Holland, still holding her torn sleeve closed. Wardell's eyes swept the scene. Training weapons, target systems active, the shoot house door still open. She processed the tactical picture in seconds. Someone explain what happened here. Major Brennan stepped forward. Ma'am, we have a civilian contractor with what appears to be fraudulent military insignia, a Ranger Regiment tattoo. She's been demonstrating combat skills inconsistent with her position as an intelligence analyst. Wardell turned to Rebecca. Step forward. Rebecca complied, releasing her sleeve. The torn fabric revealed 6 inches of black ink. The number 75 visible, along with scroll work that suggested more text below. Your name and position. Rebecca Holland, GS-12 Intelligence Analyst, ma'am. Show me the full tattoo. Rebecca hesitated. 2 seconds, 3, then she pulled the sleeve higher. The complete image. 75th Ranger Regiment in traditional scroll format. Below it, dates, 2016 to 2022. Below that, 3 names in smaller text, SGT Cooper, SPC Martinez, PFC Kim. Wardell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition or memory, or both. She turned to her aide, a captain who'd followed from the SUV. Pull her personnel file, complete clearance background. The aide opened a laptop, fingers moving across keys. 45 seconds of typing. His expression shifted from routine to confusion. Ma'am, her file shows employment gaps, large gaps, 2016 through 2022. Her current clearance level is TS/SCI with Special Access Program notation. Lieutenant Mercer couldn't contain himself. Civilians don't get SAP clearances. The aide continued reading. Previous employment listed as Department of Defense, but specifics are redacted. Classification level is compartmented. I can't access details without specific authorization codes. Captain Pruitt stepped closer. She refused to explain the tattoo, ma'am. She's been demonstrating skills far beyond civilian capability. She cleared the shoot house in 47 seconds with perfect discrimination. Wardell's eyebrow rose fractionally. 47 seconds? Yes, ma'am. Only people who move that fast are special operations. Or instructors. Wardell's gaze returned to Rebecca. These are serious allegations, Miss Holland. Stolen valor is a federal crime. Impersonating military personnel undermines the integrity of everyone who served. What's your response? Rebecca's hands were steady, but her breathing had changed. Faster, shallower. Ma'am, my previous employment is classified. I'm not authorized to discuss it without proper clearance verification and need-to-know justification. Major Brennan made a sound that might have been a laugh. Convenient excuse. Wardell's head turned with mechanical precision. Major, interrupt again and you'll be relieved of duty immediately. Am I clear? Brennan's face went pale. Yes, ma'am. Wardell addressed Rebecca again. I have the clearance to access your file, but I'm giving you the option to explain first, on the record, in front of these witnesses. Rebecca's jaw muscle flexed. Her eyes tracked the remaining personnel, calculating exposure and consequences. I'd prefer not to, ma'am. That's not how this works. You're accused of stolen valor in front of witnesses with photographic evidence. You either explain voluntarily, or I verify through official channels and it becomes part of the permanent record. Your choice. The aide's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, surprise crossing his face. Ma'am, it's Colonel Davis from JSOC. He says it's urgent and concerns the current situation. Wardell took the phone, walked 20 feet away for privacy. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Her posture changed halfway through. Shoulders straightened, expression shifted from investigative to something approaching respect. She returned, handed the phone back to her aide. Everyone not directly involved in this incident is dismissed, immediately. Specialist Ortiz and 5 others hesitated. I said dismissed, soldiers. Move. They scattered. Only 8 remained. Wardell, Fisher, Brennan, Pruitt, Mercer, Reed, the aide, and Rebecca. Wardell's voice dropped to command tone. What I'm about to disclose is not for general distribution. It will not be discussed outside this group without my explicit authorization. Major Brennan, Captain Pruitt, Lieutenant Mercer, acknowledge understanding. Yes, ma'am. 3 voices, uncertain but compliant. Wardell turned to Rebecca. Captain Holland, Colonel Davis sends his regards. He's wondering why you didn't contact him when this situation began. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. Major Brennan's voice cracked. Captain? Wardell continued as if he hadn't spoken. Before this proceeds further, I need you all to understand something. What you're about to hear will be uncomfortable. You will not interrupt, you will listen, you will absorb the information. Then you will consider how your actions have contributed to this situation. Understood? Yes, ma'am. 4 voices now, Brennan's barely audible. Rebecca remained silent, eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Wardell's shoulder. The 1,000-yard stare of someone watching things that existed only in memory. Wardell pulled a tablet from her aide, typed in authorization codes. The screen illuminated with classified files, redacted sections forming black bars across most of the text, but enough remained visible to tell a story. Captain Rebecca Holland, service number redacted, formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment, 3rd Battalion, Charlie Company, from 2016 to 2022. Audible gasps from Pruitt and Mercer. Women weren't allowed in regiment until... Mercer caught himself, stopped. Ranger Assessment and Selection Program opened to women in 2015. Captain Holland was among the first to volunteer. She passed RASP on her first attempt. Graduated Ranger School in 2016, one of 3 women in her class to complete the course without recycles. Wardell looked up from the tablet. She spent 6 years in battalion, 4 combat deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and 1 classified location I cannot name in this forum. Colonel Fisher stood motionless. his expression that of someone watching a tactical situation deteriorate beyond recovery. Direct action raids, 47 confirmed. High-value target extractions, 12. Decorations include Silver Star with Valor device, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, Purple Heart with 2 Oak Leaf clusters, Army Commendation Medal with Valor, and Combat Infantryman Badge. Lieutenant Mercer's hand had gone to his mouth. Captain Pruitt had tears forming in her eyes, though whether from shame or shock was unclear. Major Brennan simply stared, the color draining from his face in real time. Wardell continued reading. Medically retired March 2022 following catastrophic combat incident resulting in loss of assigned team. Diagnosis: post-traumatic stress disorder, survivor's guilt, recommended for non-combat assignment pending psychological evaluation. She closed the tablet. Captain Holland specifically requested low-profile civilian placement, intelligence analysis, desk work, somewhere she could continue serving without direct combat responsibility. Rebecca's hands had formed fists at her sides, not aggressive, defensive, the posture of someone fighting to maintain control. Wardell came to attention, rendered a salute. Captain Holland. Rebecca's body responded before her mind could interfere, 8 years of muscle memory overriding conscious thought. She came to attention, returned the salute despite civilian clothes and torn sleeves. Lieutenant General Wardell lowered her salute and took 1 step closer to Rebecca. The evening air had cooled, bringing that sharp clarity that made every sound distinct. Somewhere across the base, a generator hummed, a door slammed, normal sounds of a forward operating base continuing its operations while 8 people stood in a moment that had stopped time. The Silver Star citation is worth reading aloud. Wardell pulled the tablet back up, scrolled to a specific document. March 14, 2022, village of Kush Tepe, Afghanistan. Captain Holland's team was conducting high-value target extraction when they were ambushed by insurgent forces. Rebecca's breathing changed, faster, shallower. Her eyes tracked to the horizon, seeing something that wasn't there anymore. Initial IED strike killed the team leader and 2 operators immediately. Captain Holland sustained shrapnel wounds to her left arm and torso. Despite injuries, she assumed command of the remaining 4 team members and established defensive position in a partial, lively, collapsed structure. Major Brennan had gone completely still. Captain Pruitt's hand covered her mouth. Lieutenant Mercer stared at the ground, unable to maintain eye contact. Enemy forces numbering approximately 30 engaged from 3 sides. Captain Holland directed defensive fire while simultaneously calling in close air support and medevac extraction. During the 40-minute engagement, she sustained 3 additional gunshot wounds: right shoulder, left thigh, and grazing wound to the head. Wardell's voice remained level, professional, but something underneath it carried weight. She refused evacuation until all team members, living and deceased, were secured for extraction. She was the last person loaded onto the helicopter. Medical personnel reported she lost consciousness immediately after confirming all personnel were accounted for. The silence stretched. No one moved, no one spoke. She spent 6 weeks in Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, another 4 months in Walter Reed. Physical wounds healed, psychological wounds did not. Wardell lowered the tablet. The Army retired her with full honors. She could have stayed. Command wanted her to stay. She declined. Sergeant First Class Reed, who'd remained silent throughout, finally spoke. "Permission to speak, ma'am?" "Granted. I served with Captain Holland in 2019. Joint Task Force operation, classified location. Our convoy was hit by coordinated ambush. She pulled me out of a burning vehicle while taking fire from 2 directions. I wouldn't be standing here without her." Rebecca's eyes closed briefly, a micro-expression of pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. Wardell nodded. "The question before us now is why Captain Holland chose to conceal her service record and why she was subjected to public humiliation for that choice." She turned to face Major Brennan directly. "Explain your actions, Major." Brennan's voice came out hoarse. "Ma'am, I had no idea. If I'd known, I never would have." "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a civilian woman in an intelligence position and made assumptions about her capabilities and her worth. Continue. There's no excuse, ma'am. I was wrong, completely wrong. Why did you challenge her? What was the objective? Brennan swallowed hard. She corrected my tactical assessment in the morning briefing, in front of 40 personnel. It felt like insubordination, like she was undermining my authority. Was her assessment correct? Silence. I asked you a question, Major. Yes, ma'am, her assessment was correct. The enemy movement pattern was repositioning, not withdrawal. We've since confirmed it through additional intelligence. Wardell turned to Rebecca. Captain Holland, why didn't you identify yourself when this began? Rebecca's voice was quiet but steady. Because I'm not that person anymore, ma'am. I can't be. Explain. The last time I led people into combat, I brought 3 bodies home in bags. Her hands unclenched slightly. I froze for 7 seconds when that IED detonated. 7 seconds. In combat, that's multiple lifetimes. If I'd moved faster, if I'd recognized the pattern earlier, maybe Sergeant Cooper doesn't step on that pressure plate. Maybe Specialist Martinez doesn't take that round through his vest. Maybe Private First Class Kim gets home to meet his daughter. Her voice cracked on the last word, first sign of emotion breaking through. I came here because I needed to serve without the risk of getting anyone else killed. I needed to contribute without carrying the weight of command. I needed to be useful without being responsible for breathing or not breathing. Captain Pruitt had tears running down her face now. Lieutenant Mercer's hands shook. Rebecca continued. When Major Brennan called me a desk jockey, he was right. I am a desk jockey. I chose this desk. I needed this desk. Because behind a desk, my mistakes cost mission effectiveness, not lives. Behind a desk, when I freeze, nobody dies because I wasn't fast enough. Wardell's expression softened fractionally. Captain, the Psychological Review Board cleared you for return to duty. The incident was classified as combat circumstances beyond your control. You received the Silver Star specifically because your actions under impossible conditions saved lives. I know what the board said, ma'am. I was there. But they weren't in Kush Tepe. They didn't watch Cooper's blood soak into sand while trying to stop arterial bleeding with a tourniquet that wouldn't hold. They didn't hear Martinez asking for his mom in Spanish while his lungs filled. They didn't see Kim's face when he realized he'd never meet his daughter. Her voice cracked on the last word, first sign of emotion breaking through. I came here because I needed to serve without the risk of getting anyone else killed. I needed to contribute without carrying the weight of command. I needed to be useful without being responsible for breathing or not breathing. Captain Pruitt had tears running down her face now. Lieutenant Mercer's hands shook. Rebecca continued. When Major Brennan called me a desk jockey, he was right. I am a desk jockey. I chose this desk. I needed this desk. Because behind a desk, my mistakes cost mission effectiveness, not lives. Behind a desk, when I freeze, nobody dies because I wasn't fast enough. Wardell's expression softened fractionally. Captain, the Psychological Review Board cleared you for return to duty. The incident was classified as combat circumstances beyond your control. You received the Silver Star specifically because your actions under impossible conditions saved lives. I know what the board said, ma'am. I was there. But they weren't in Kush Tepe. They didn't watch Cooper's blood soak into sand while trying to stop arterial bleeding with a tourniquet that wouldn't hold. They didn't hear Martinez asking for his mom in Spanish while his lungs filled. They didn't see Kim's face when he realized he'd never meet his daughter. Her voice cracked on the last word, first sign of emotion breaking through. I came here because I needed to serve without the risk of getting anyone else killed. I needed to contribute without carrying the weight of command. I needed to be useful without being responsible for breathing or not breathing. Captain Pruitt had tears running down her face now. Lieutenant Mercer's hands shook. Rebecca continued. When Major Brennan called me a desk jockey, he was right. I am a desk jockey. I chose this desk. I needed this desk. Because behind a desk, my mistakes cost mission effectiveness, not lives. Behind a desk, when I freeze, nobody dies because I wasn't fast enough. Wardell's expression softened fractionally. Captain, the Psychological Review Board cleared you for return to duty. The incident was classified as combat circumstances beyond your control. You received the Silver Star specifically because your actions under impossible conditions saved lives. I know what the board said, ma'am. I was there. But they weren't in Kush Tepe. They didn't watch Cooper's blood soak into sand while trying to stop arterial bleeding of a tourniquet that wouldn't hold. They didn't hear Martinez asking for his mom in Spanish while his lungs filled. They didn't see Kim's face when he realized he'd never meet his daughter. The silence that followed felt like pressure, like weight, like gravity had increased. Specialist Ortiz, who'd been dismissed but had lingered just beyond the immediate group, stepped forward. "Ma'am, request permission to speak?" Wardell nodded. "My brother was killed in action 2 years ago, Marine Corps. I watched what it did to my parents, to our family. Watching someone survive something like that and still choose to serve, even in a different capacity, that's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength." He looked at Rebecca. "You didn't owe us your story. We owed you basic respect, regardless." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry about your brother. His name was Corporal David Ortiz. He was 24. I know." Rebecca's voice was barely audible. "I pulled his file when you first introduced yourself. I read his service record. He was a good Marine." Ortiz's face crumbled. The random gesture of respect from someone who'd made the effort to know his brother's name undid him completely. Lieutenant Mercer found his voice. "My brother, David Mercer. He was KIA in 2021, Helmand Province." Rebecca nodded slowly. "2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. I remember reading the casualty report. I'm sorry." "How many reports have you read?" Mercer asked. "All of them. Every casualty from 2016 forward. Every name, every circumstance I could access. It's part of my work. Intelligence analysis includes pattern recognition from casualty reports, but it's also remembering they were people, not statistics." Wardell struck. Sightened. "Major Brennan, Captain Pruitt, Lieutenant Mercer, you will report to my office at 070 tomorrow. This incident will be reviewed formally. Charges of creating hostile work environment and conduct unbecoming will be investigated." Brennan's voice was hollow. "Yes, ma'am." "Captain Holland, you have my formal apology on behalf of the United States Army. What happened here should never have occurred. You served with distinction. You continue to serve with distinction. You deserve better than what you received today." Rebecca's eyes met Wardell's. "It's fine, ma'am." "No, Captain, it's not fine, and we'll ensure it doesn't happen again." Wardell turned to Colonel Fisher. "Colonel, you'll file a complete incident report. Include recommendations for mandatory training on respect for transitioning service members and civilian contractors with military backgrounds." "Yes, ma'am." The group began to disperse. Major Brennan approached Rebecca, stopped 6 feet away. "Captain Holland, I don't have words adequate for what I need to say." Rebecca looked at him, 32 years old, but her eyes carried decades more. "You can call me Bex, or Miss Holland. I'm not captain anymore. You earned that rank. And I gave it up, on purpose, for reasons that made sense to me." She pulled her torn sleeve closed again. "You made assumptions. They were wrong. It happens. Learn from it. I washed out of Ranger School." Brennan's confession came out rushed. "Twice. Mountain phase both times. I've spent my career trying to prove I was good enough. Seeing someone who actually made it through, someone I dismissed as a desk jockey, it's the worst moment of my professional life." Rebecca's expression shifted slightly. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. What happened to me in Kush Tepe will define the rest of my life. Every decision I make is filtered through 7 seconds of hesitation that cost 3 lives. So when you call me a desk jockey like it's an insult, understand that I fought harder to get this desk than I ever fought to earn a tab. 24 hours later, Lieutenant General Patricia Wardell's temporary office at Forward Operating Base Stallworth held 3 officers standing at rigid attention. Morning light filtered through reinforced windows, casting sharp shadows across military standard furniture. The wall clock read 0702 hours. Wardell had made them wait 2 minutes past the appointed time, a deliberate choice that allowed anxiety to build. Major Tyler Brennan stood center, his uniform immaculate but his face showing the wear of a sleepless night. Captain Vanessa Pruitt to his left, red-rimmed eyes betraying hours of crying. Lieutenant Jake Mercer to his right, younger and visibly shaking. Wardell sat behind the desk, hands folded over a thick manila folder. She let the silence extend another 15 seconds before speaking. Major Brennan, you are hereby relieved of your position as operations officer, effective immediately. You will be reassigned to division staff pending administrative review. A letter of reprimand will be entered into your permanent file. This action will remain visible to all future promotion boards. Brennan's face drained of remaining color. Ma'am, you publicly humiliated a decorated combat veteran. You created a hostile work environment. You demonstrated catastrophic failure in judgment and leadership. You weaponized your authority to satisfy personal insecurity. You are fortunate to retain your rank. Wardell's voice carried the flat finality of legal proceedings. Do you have anything to say that might change my assessment? No, ma'am. Wardell turned to Pruitt. Captain Pruitt, you are removed from the upcoming promotion board. You will complete mandatory training on leadership, professional conduct, and gender dynamics in military environments. Written reprimand in your file. You will serve an additional year in current position before being eligible for advancement. Pruitt's shoulders sagged. Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Mercer, written reprimand. You will produce a 5,000-word essay on the consequences of assumption and prejudice in military leadership, due in 72 hours. You will also complete sensitivity training and spend 40 hours performing community service on this base, specifically assisting with wounded warrior transition programs. Yes, ma'am. All three of you will issue formal written apologies to Captain Holland. These will be reviewed by myself personally before delivery. You are dismissed. They saluted, executed precise outfaces, and departed in silence. 1400 hours. Rebecca's office occupied a cramped corner of the intelligence section, barely large enough for a desk, 2 filing cabinets, and a chair. No windows. Fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. The space of someone deliberately forgotten, which was exactly what she'd wanted. A knock on the doorframe. Major Brennan stood in the doorway, holding a folded piece of paper. May I come in? Rebecca looked up from her computer screen, showing enemy movement analysis. It's your base, Major. It's your office. He entered, remained standing. I wrote the formal apology General Wardell required, but I wanted to say something in person first, if you'll allow it. Rebecca gestured to the empty chair. Brennan sat, the paper clutched in both hands like a lifeline. I spent all night thinking about why I did what I did. The easy answer is that you embarrassed me in front of my personnel. The harder answer is that you represented everything I failed to achieve. He unfolded the paper, then refolded it without reading. I attempted Ranger School twice, failed mountain phase both times. Couldn't hack the cold, the elevation, the physical demands. It broke something in me. Made me spend the next decade trying to prove I was still worthy of respect. Rebecca's expression remained neutral. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know my behavior came from my inadequacy, not anything you did or didn't do. You walked into a briefing room with more combat experience than everyone there combined, and I treated you like you were worthless because I can't see past my own failures. What do you want me to say, Major? Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. He set the folded apology on her desk. I just needed you to know that what happened wasn't about you. It was about me being small and threatened and stupid. Rebecca picked up the paper, read it silently. The apology was thorough, specific, and clearly written by someone who understood exactly what they'd done wrong. She set it down. You asked me earlier what happened in Kush Tepe. I told you about freezing for 7 seconds. What I didn't tell you is that before I froze, I made a tactical decision that put my team in that position. I chose the route. I chose the timing. I chose to push forward despite incomplete intelligence. Brennan started to speak. Rebecca raised a hand. I was right to make that call based on available information. The after-action review confirmed it. But 3 people still died because of decisions I made. So when you tell me your actions came from inadequacy, I understand that. I live with inadequacy every single day. The difference is I learned to recognize it accept it, and work within its limitations. How? Therapy, medication for 6 months, accepting that I'll never be who I was before March 14th, 2022, finding a way to serve that doesn't require me to be that person. She leaned back in her chair. You failed Ranger School. That doesn't define your worth as an officer or as a person. But using that failure as an excuse to diminish others does. Brennan nodded slowly. I requested transfer to a training support role, no operational command. I think I've been chasing the wrong definition of success for too long. Maybe that's growth. Another knock. Captain Pruitt stood in the doorway, eyes red and swollen. Ma'am, may I speak with you? Brennan stood. I'll leave. Stay. Rebecca's tone allowed no argument. You should hear this too. Pruitt entered, remained standing. I've spent the last 24 hours examining why I participated in what happened. The conclusion isn't comfortable. Go on. I was threatened by you, by the idea of another competent woman in operational spaces. I've spent years being the token female in meetings, the one they point to when they want to prove they're progressive. I got territorial, protective of status I'd earned through being palatable rather than exceptional. Pruitt's voice cracked. I should have been your ally. Instead, I joined the people tearing you down. Rebecca stood, walked around the desk. You know what's harder than being the only woman in the room? What? Being the woman who makes it harder for other women to enter that room. Rebecca crossed her arms. I don't need your protection or your competition. I need you to do your job with integrity and help create an environment where gender is irrelevant to operational capability. I don't know how to do that. Start by examining every assumption you make about other women. Ask yourself if you're judging them by standards you don't apply to men. Catch yourself when you're performing competence for male approval rather than pursuing actual excellence. Rebecca returned to her chair. And stop treating other women as threats to your position. There's room for all of us. Pruitt nodded, tears flowing freely now. Thank you. After she left, Brennan spoke quietly. You're a better person than I would be in your position. I'm not better. I'm just tired of carrying anger. It's exhausting. 1,800 hours. The base common area had been transformed. 120 personnel gathered, more than had witnessed the original incident. Word had spread through the entire FOB. Colonel Fisher stood at the front, Lieutenant General Wardell beside him. Rebecca had been summoned despite her protests. She stood to the side, uncomfortable with attention, holding her torn sleeve closed with one hand. Fisher's voice carried across the space. We gather to acknowledge something that should have been recognized immediately. We have among us an individual who represents the finest traditions of military service. Captain Rebecca Holland served 6 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 4 combat deployments, 47 direct action raids, decorations including the Silver Star. The crowd murmured. Some had heard the story, many had not. Captain Holland chose to continue her service in a different capacity after sustaining wounds both physical and psychological. She asked for no recognition, no special treatment, no acknowledgement of her sacrifice. She simply wanted to do her job. Rebecca's jaw tightened. This was exactly what she'd tried to avoid. Instead, she was subjected to humiliation and mockery. We failed her. I failed her by not creating an environment where such treatment was impossible. Fisher held up a challenge coin. This coin represents FOB Stallworth. It's not particularly prestigious, but every person here knows what it means to earn one. Captain Holland, will you accept this as acknowledgement of your continued service? Rebecca approached slowly, accepted the coin. Thank you, sir. Would you like to say anything? She looked at the assembled personnel, young faces, old faces, people who'd seen combat, and people who'd seen only training. I'm not special. I'm someone who tried, failed, tried again, and kept going until the math worked out. That's all any of us can do. Her voice grew quieter. The people you should honor aren't here. Sergeant William Cooper, Specialist Carlos Martinez, Private First Class David Kim. They were the special ones. They were the heroes. I'm just the one who survived, and I'm trying to figure out how to make that mean something. The silence that followed held weight. Specialist Ortiz stepped forward. Ma'am, my brother died in 2021. I've struggled with what his death means, what my service means now that he's gone. Watching you continue to serve, even after everything, that helps. It helps more than you know. Rebecca's eyes glistened. What was your brother's name? David, Corporal David Ortiz. I know. I told you yesterday. He mattered. His service matters too. And your service matters too. Different doesn't mean less. 1 week. After the ceremony, Colonel Raymond Fisher knocked on Rebecca Holland's office door at 0830 hours. She looked up from 3 monitors displaying intelligence patterns across the province, a cold cup of coffee beside her keyboard, the challenge coin from the ceremony serving as a paperweight. Got a minute? Fisher entered without waiting for full invitation, a privilege of rank and earned familiarity. Always, sir. He closed the door, sat in the cramped visitor chair. General Wargile made a recommendation before she left. She thinks you'd be valuable as a veteran transition advisor, help outgoing service members adjust to civilian life or different military roles. Share your experience navigating that change. Rebecca's hands stilled on the keyboard. Sir, I don't want a position that trades on my background. It wouldn't be trading. It would be utilizing relevant experience to help people who need guidance. Fisher leaned forward. A few hours a week, no command responsibility, no combat role, just conversation with people facing similar transitions. You'd keep your analysis work. This would be additional duty. I'm not qualified to counsel people. You're more qualified than anyone else on this base. You've walked the path they're about to walk. You know what the transition costs and what it takes to survive it. Rebecca looked at the 3 photographs tucked in the corner of her desk. Cooper, Martinez, Kim. Faces frozen in time, forever young while she aged past them. Can I think about it? Take the time you need. 3 days later, Rebecca sat across from Sergeant Emily Warren in a small conference room that smelled of old coffee and uncertainty. Warren was 28, combat engineer with 2 deployments, facing medical retirement after an IED blast destroyed her hearing in one ear and damaged her balance permanently. Everyone says I'm wasting my potential by getting out. Warren's voice carried frustration and grief in equal measure. That I should fight the medical board, try for a waiver, stay in and keep climbing. But I'm exhausted. I'm tired of pretending I'm fine when I'm not. I just want to go home. Rebecca listened without interrupting, hands folded on the table. No notepad, no official documentation, just presence. My family doesn't understand. They're proud of my service. They want me to make it a career. But every time something loud happens, I hit the ground. I can't walk a straight line without concentrating. I'm not the soldier I was, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Warren's eyes filled. Does that make me weak? What do you want? Rebecca asked quietly. I want to sleep without nightmares. I want to stop feeling like I'm failing everyone. I want to figure out who I am without a rank. Then do that. Your service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It just looks different. Warren stared at her. Everyone else tells me to fight, to appeal, to stay in. Everyone else isn't living in your body or your mind. You know what you can handle. You know what you need. Respecting your own limitations isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of strength. But what if I regret it? Rebecca pulled up her sleeve, revealing the full tattoo. I regret a lot of things. I regret hesitating for 7 seconds. I regret the route I chose. I regret surviving when 3 better people didn't. But I don't regret choosing to continue serving in a way that I can sustain. Different doesn't mean less. Warren broke down completely, crying with the relief of permission she hadn't realized she needed. Rebecca waited, patient and still, until the tears slowed. How do you live with the regret? Badly most days, better some days. I wake up at 0300 from nightmares. I avoid crowds. I can't watch fireworks without planning escape routes. But I also analyze intelligence that keeps people safer. I do work that matters. I'm useful without being responsible for whether people breathe or stop breathing. Does it get easier? No, you get stronger at carrying it, that's all. Word spread through the base about Rebecca's transition counseling. By week 2, she had 6 appointments scheduled. By week 3, personnel from other forward operating bases were requesting remote sessions. She maintained her intelligence work, but the additional duty had become something approaching purpose. Major Tyler Brennan requested a session in week 4. He entered the conference room looking diminished, the arrogance that had defined him replaced by something raw. I got orders for the training support assignment. I report in 3 weeks. Rebecca nodded. How do you feel about it? Relieved, terrified, like I'm admitting defeat. Are you? Brennan considered the question. I spent 12 years chasing a definition of success that wasn't mine. It belonged to my father, who was Special Forces, to my brother, who's a Ranger, to every recruitment poster that said being a warrior was the only thing worth being. He looked at his hands. But I'm good at training support. I'm good at logistics and planning. I'm good at the things I dismissed as less important. Why did you dismiss them? Because they weren't sexy, weren't impressive, weren't what gets written about in books. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. The guy who packed my parachute before a jump saved my life a dozen times. The logistics officer who ensured ammunition arrived on time made every firefight survivable. The support personnel who maintained weapons kept us operational. She met his eyes. Every role matters. The only unimportant job is the one done without integrity. You treated me like you were worthless because your job wasn't operational command. Yes. And now I'm facing becoming what I mocked. Yes. Brennan exhaled slowly. How do I live with what I did? You apologized, you faced consequences, you're changing behavior. That's all anyone can do. Self-flagellation feels righteous but accomplishes nothing. Rebecca's tone softened slightly. I live with getting 3 people killed. You live with being an asshole for a day. The scales aren't balanced, but the principle is the same. Acknowledge the harm, make different choices, keep moving forward. Do you forgive me? I'm working on it. Ask me in 6 months. At 0300 hours on a Thursday, Rebecca woke from the nightmare. Always the same nightmare. The IED blast in slow motion. Cooper's face in the moment before the pressure plate triggered. Martinez calling for his mother in Spanish. Kim's blood soaking into sand while she tried to stop the bleeding with hands that shook too badly to maintain pressure. She didn't try to return to sleep. That never worked. Instead, she dressed in PT gear and headed to the gym. The base was quiet at this hour, just generators and the occasional guard patrol. Sergeant First Class Monica Reed was already on a treadmill, running with the steady pace of someone fighting their own demons. She nodded when Rebecca entered. No words, just acknowledgement between people who understood that 0300 workouts weren't about fitness. They ran side by side for 90 minutes. When they finished, Reed spoke for the first time. It ever get easier? No, but you get stronger at carrying it. That what you tell the people you counsel? It's the truth. Reed wiped sweat from her face. I lost 3 people in 2017. Ambush in Syria. I was the senior enlisted. My calls put them in that position. Rebecca stopped stretching. What were their names? Staff Sergeant Hughes, Specialist Chen, Private Johnson. I'll add them to my list. You keep a list? Everyone, from 2016 forward. I read their casualty reports, remember their names. It doesn't bring them back, but it makes them more than statistics. Reed's eyes filled. That's the hardest kind of remembering. It's the only kind that matters. 2 weeks later, Rebecca entered the Tactical Operations Center for morning briefing, the same room where this had all begun. 43 personnel in tiered seating, digital maps on screens, the smell of bad coffee and military efficiency. She took her seat in the civilian section. No one laughed. Several personnel nodded respectfully. Specialist Ortiz, who'd been promoted to the operations planning cell, smiled. The new operations officer, a Major Williams, transferred in from division, presented the intelligence assessment. Enemy movement in Sector 5 shows continued repositioning. Based on analysis from our intelligence section, specifically Miss Holland's report, we believe they're preparing coordinated attacks on supply routes. He gestured to Rebecca. Miss Holland, would you brief your assessment? She stood, moved to the front, plugged her tablet into the display system. 3 slides showing movement patterns, timing analysis, and predicted attack vectors. She briefed for 4 minutes, fielding questions with patience and precision. No one interrupted. No one dismissed her input. The brief concluded with her recommendations integrated into operational planning. After dismissal, Major Williams approached. "That was solid work. Command is using your analysis for theater-wide planning." "Thank you, sir. I read about what happened before I arrived. Want you to know that won't happen under my watch. Your expertise is valued here." Rebecca nodded, gathered her materials. As she left, she passed the spot where Major Brennan had stood when he'd called her a desk jockey. The memory carried less weight now. Not gone, but manageable. Evening found Rebecca at the small memorial on base, 3 stones arranged in careful pattern. She placed them there in week 1 and visited every few days. Cooper, Martinez, Kim. Still here, still fighting, just differently now. She adjusted the stones, removing dust. "I hope that's enough. I hope you'd understand that I can't be who I was when you knew me, but I'm trying to be someone you'd still respect." The wind carried no answers, but she hadn't expected any. Her phone buzzed. Email from Lieutenant General Wardell. Subject: Consultant Request, Ranger School Female Integration Program. The message was brief. "Captain Holland, the Army is expanding female integration into Ranger School. We need consultants who've been through the program and understand the unique challenges. Your perspective would be invaluable. Interested?" Rebecca stared at the screen. Going back to Ranger School, even as a consultant, meant confronting everything she'd left behind, meant being Captain Holland again instead of just Bex, meant acknowledging that her service hadn't ended, just evolved. Her finger hovered over the reply button. Above her, stars emerged in the Afghan sky, the same stars that had watched over Kush Tepe, over every firefight, over every loss and every survival. She thought about Sergeant Warren, finding permission to transition, about Major Brennan, learning to value work he'd dismissed, about herself, discovering that service took infinite forms, and none were less valuable than others. The cursor blinked, waiting, patient. Rebecca began typing. "General Wardell, I'm interested in learning more. Not sure I'm the right person, but willing to discuss how I might contribute. Respectfully, Rebecca Holland." She hit send before doubt could intervene. The response came in 2 minutes. "That's all I'm asking. We'll talk next week. Well done, Captain. Your service continues to matter." Rebecca pocketed the phone, looked at the 3 stones one more time. Different doesn't mean less. Someone smart told me that recently. I'm starting to believe it might be true. She walked back toward her office, toward the work that waited, toward whatever came next. The nightmares would come again at 0300. The regret would surface in quiet moments. The weight would never fully lift. But she was carrying it. She was moving forward. She was still serving, still contributing, still mattering in ways she was only beginning to understand. The desk jockey who'd been dismissed and mocked was gone. In her place stood someone harder to define, but no less valuable. A veteran finding new ways to fight. A survivor learning to live. A leader discovering that influence came in forms she'd never imagined. Behind her, the memorial stones caught starlight. Ahead, the operations center glowed with purpose. And somewhere between memory and mission, Rebecca Holland continued the work of becoming whoever she needed to be next.